So as part of my sermon preparation this week, I decided yesterday to go to the Ledges State Park, go hiking with my friend. These are the kind of sacrifices I make in order to preach on Sunday morning. So I went, if you don't know where the Ledges State Park, it's about 45 miles north, slightly west of Des Moines. It's a beautiful, anybody here been to Ledges? Well, a lot more than me. First time I'd ever been there. And I was hoping to have kind of a Henry David Thoreau kind of moment, to look for the face of God in nature, because obviously that's the theme this morning. And so it was really important to me to kind of go in the right spiritual mind. I wanted to be like Thoreau, who went to Walden Pond and came to seek the essentials of life and to gain deep spiritual insight. And the truth be told, Thoreau spent more than 2 years in the woods, and I spent less than 2 hours. But still, I wanted to go in this beautiful park and see the face of God. And I was looking. But despite its beauty and despite the opportunity, I have to say I ran into some trouble. First of all, it's kind of hard to see the face of God when it's pouring rain. You're wiping the rain from your eyes. That makes it difficult to see God in nature when rain the storm is coming. It actually led to the 2-hour delay, I think, for the Iowa State game. It's also hard, I noticed it's kind of hard to look for the face of God as you're listening to thunder roll and you see lightning flash through the sky. It's kind of hard to see the face of God. I thought about that as I'm standing high, or as I'm high up on this hill, that lightning and thunder, and thinking, would I really be willing to sacrifice my life for a good sermon? I'm not sure. So, and it's hard to see the face of God when you're ducking lightning, to be truthful. And then, having gone, I was struck by, and I didn't realize how steep the trails were, with rocks piled on top of each other with the railroad ties. There's some people nodding back there. And it's really hard to see the face of God in nature when you're sucking wind, trying not to pass out. And it was particularly hard to see the face of God as we're coming down on slippery, wet rocks. I'd hate to admit it, kind of on all fours as I was going down, trying to prevent my own imminent death. Now, that might be a way to see the face of God, but it wasn't one I was willing to do. So I'd have to say I had a very difficult time seeing the face of God in Ledges State Park. In part because it was a little bit wilder than I expected. This tame boy from the suburbs, it was a little bit wilder than I had anticipated. There's a proverb that says, I love this line, I'm not sure I like it that much, but it says, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. And I was doing a lot of fearing yesterday. Now, John Calvin, who's one of the theological fathers of our spiritual tradition, our religious tradition, wrote back in the 16th century that in creation and nature, in the cosmos around us, we can see, so importantly, we can see the handwriting of God. And we can see it's very much a biblical notion. If you read through the Psalms, just the psalm we read today, the sense in which we can see God in the cosmos, in the universe, and in the beauty of creation, and the majesties of the sea, and the cedars of Lebanon, that we can actually see God in this awesome and amazing nature that we live in. And the passage I read from Job is a really interesting one, and I'll remind you a little bit about the story of Job. Job, of course, has incredible suffering that he's experiencing. Everything good in his life is torn from him, family and friends, and he finds himself in the midst of this great suffering, and he's struggling to understand. He's been a good and righteous man. He's trying to understand why this would happen to him, and he's wrestling with that deep within his soul, and he has some friends who come over and do unfriend-like things. In other words, try to give him the answer about why this is. And their answer is, hey, Job, somehow you screwed up. You did something wrong. You messed up, and so God is punishing you. And Job, a man of incredible integrity, says, no, that's not true. I haven't done anything to deserve this. And then he uses this line. He says, go ask the animals. He says, go ask the animals and they will teach you. Go ask the birds of the air and they will teach you. Go out into the wild, into nature, into the creation, and ask the birds of the air and the fishes in the sea, and ask the mountains in the land, and they will teach you. And what is it they will teach you? This radical reality that we're not in control. Because the truth is, the wildness of creation and the cosmos, while beautiful, is a little frightening. And we're reminded, you know what? We're not in control. And maybe that was the insight I got from my little trip to Ledges, is I wasn't in control, and that made me uncomfortable. That the very wildness of nature is such that it's not in my control. There's this line in that text, what does it say? That God has a hand on everything. And so when there's a sense in which Job is saying we're not in control, that God is beyond our control, it doesn't matter what I do, that doesn't control God. Because God is much wilder than that. Just ask the animals and nature and the cosmos. And so Job's assertion is God is far beyond our conceptions, so wild we cannot hold onto God. So we might look at this picture of the cosmos and see its beauty and be amazed and awed at its beauty. And it is beautiful. But you know what? If you really look at it, it's kind of scary and wild too. A cosmos filled with black holes, suns bursting. And so in a way, Job is saying, and we should reflect on, the truth is, God is a lot wilder than we expected. And that's kind of scary. Because we can't control God. We can't even grasp the wildness of God. I mean, we try. Well, if I do this thing, then God will reward me, or I say these words, or I have these right beliefs, then God can be controlled, right? I can control God. But the truth about the face of God in the cosmos and in the nature around us is God is a little wild. Uncontainable. How do we even comprehend, much less try to explain this idea of infinite grace? We can't even grasp infinity. Pictures of these cosmos, scientists point out that any picture we have of the cosmos only captures about 30% of the entire thing. And we think we have God tamed in our churches, in our theology, in our little boxes of orthodoxy. The truth is, God's a lot wilder than we think. Now, there's another picture. Show the next slide, Dave. Astronauts tell of this moment, when they, particularly when the astronauts went on the Apollo, and there's this moment when they're out of there in space, and they look back on the Earth, and there's this transformation of their perspective. This Earth, this planet is such a tiny thing in the vastness of space. And there was like this transformation in a way of their perspectives, all the things we get caught up in, thinking that's the center of the universe, but the face of God in nature, in the environment, in the cosmos reminds us of a grace more infinite and large than we can even fully grasp. A grace so big, it's kind of scary. Now, one of the translations of that proverb isn't the fear of the Lord. The Hebrew word here might be awe before the Lord. Is just the beginning of wisdom. That sense of standing before the cosmos and nature and seeing God's face in the midst of it and being awed beyond our imagination. And that begins our journey to wisdom. Now, I'm going to share probably one of my favorite all-time quotes. I don't think I've shared this. It was written by a woman named Annie Dillard. She's a poet. She's really a poet of nature and of encounters with nature. And she is a person who can profoundly see God in the wildness of the world and the environment around us and finds that an incredibly meaningful thing. And she says the first lesson we got to understand about this is that we need to take this wild God seriously. And here's the quote. She says, "Does anyone have the foggiest idea what sort of power we so blithely invoke? Or, as I suspect, does no one believe a word of it?" You see, churches are children playing on the floor with their chemistry sets, mixing up a batch of TNT to kill a Sunday morning. It is madness, she writes, to wear ladies' straw hats and velvet hats to church. We should all, when we come to church, be wearing crash helmets. Ushers in the back should be handing out and issuing life preservers, signal flares. They should be prepared to lash you to the very pews you sit in. For the reality is, this sleeping God may wake someday and take offense, or the waking God may actually draw us out to where we never can return. So I invite you this week to seek the face of God, this wild God, to put on your crash helmets and maybe hold on to a life preserver and be willing to encounter that wild and graceful God who so wants to love you. To God be the glory this day and forevermore. Amen.